Leaves. The prisoners of infinite choice have built their house in a field below the wood and are at peace. It is autumn, and dead leaves on their way to the river scratch like birds at the windows or tick on the road. Somewhere there is an afterlife of dead leaves, a stadium filled with an infinite rustling and sighing. Somewhere in the heaven of lost futures, the lives we might have lived have found their own fulfillment. So that's Leaves by Derek Mahon. We're celebrating his work and lamenting the loss of one of Ireland's greatest modern poets. When I lived in Ireland, I saw all of the great poets in Dublin. Heaney, Carson, Hartnett, Meehan, saw the whole gang, but I never saw Mahon read until one day I was living in Hammersmith and I got a phone call from Rosalind Scanlon saying, "Are you free? Come down to the Irish Centre. Derek Mahon's about to go on stage." And so I ran down and saw Derek Mahon read for the first and only time in my experience. Racker Donnelly was the host and Mahon read. It was a short and sweet reading. Obviously he's got a philosophy of leave 'em wanting more. I remember he told a really good anecdote. He said he was in America and he met some young poets, and the young poets said to Derek Mahon, "Derek, do you know what the young poets of America are writing about these days?" And Derek said, "Well," I said, "No, love and revolution, I presume?" They said, "No, Derek, we're writing about food." So yeah, it was great to see him. He was reading poems about the goddess and the environment, and thanks to Roz I got to have a brief word with him after the event as well. So nice just to have a moment's contact with an Irish poet. So the second poem I'm going to read is a version he's done from a 19th century French poet. Now this is one of the things I really like about Mahon. He's totally steeped in 19th century French poetry. He sometimes do a version of Baudelaire, he'll sometimes do a version of Corbière, he'll sometimes do a version of Rimbaud, but this is a very accomplished version of a poem by Gérard de Nerval. This is the famous character, the mad poet who walked a lobster around the centre of Paris and later committed suicide. The poem sort of expounds a philosophy where animate objects seem to have their own worlds and their own realities, their own philosophies. And it's something that recurs throughout Mahon's work, particularly in his most famous poem, A Disused Shed in County Wexford. This poem almost seems to be the forerunner of that side of his oeuvre. So here it is. The Mute Phenomena after Nerval. Your great mistake is to disregard the satire bandied among the mute phenomena. Be strong if you must. Your brusque hegemony means fuck all to the somnolent sunflower or the extinct volcano. What do you know of the revolutionary theories advanced by turnips or the sex life of cutlery? Everything is susceptible, Pythagoras said so. An ordinary, common or garden brick wall, the kind for talking to or banging your head on, resents your politics and bad draftsmanship. God is alive and lives under a stone. Already in a lost hubcap is conceived the ideal society which will replace our own. Okay, well it feels good to be reading Derek Mahon in a forest, not least because one critic called his work a forest of intertextuality. So I'm going to read a short little gem that exemplifies this quality. Ostensibly it's basically an Irish guy, you know, touching on a theme of English culture, English language, English literature, celebrating those things, but also then there's a sort of a nod to the dark side, which is the colonialism. The poem is ostensibly in the big house genre. It's about Penshurst Place. It's the family seat of the Sidneys, the most illustrious of whom was Sir Philip Sidney, the lyric poet who came just before Shakespeare. Another Elizabethan poet, Ben Jonson, wrote a big house poem called To Penshurst. This is where you wanted to go if you're a poet. And then the refrain, which you will hear twice, beautiful refrain, evokes a third Elizabethan poet, Christopher Marlowe, because it's the opening line of his poem, The Passionate Shepherd to His Love, which was regarded by many as the single finest song of the Elizabethan period. So he basically evokes three poets without naming any of them. It's a beautiful thing to do. We get a pinch of Proust, à l'ombre des jeunes filles en fleurs, in the shadow of young women in bloom. But then we also get an evocation of the 1601 Battle of Kinsale. Right, this is the last gasp of the Elizabethan era, and Elizabeth's troops crush the Irish in Kinsale. They've got Spanish forces and they've got Ulstermen coming down, but the Elizabethan armies crush the old Gaelic order when they win this battle. It's all gone, and it's just going to lead flight of the Earls and the plantations to come. So he, in one little deft brushstroke, he evokes that as the downside of all of these literary glories. So here we go. Penshurst Place. The bright drop quivering on a thorn in the rich silence after rain. Lute music in the orchard aisles, the paths ablaze with daffodils. Intrigue and venery in the air. À l'ombre des jeunes filles en fleurs, the iron hand and the velvet glove. Come live with me and be my love. A pearl face, luminously bright, shining in silence of the night. A muffled crash of smouldering logs, bad dreams of courtiers and of dogs. The Spanish ships around Kinsale, the screech owl and the nightingale, the falcon and the turtle dove. Come live with me and be my love. It reminds me then of a quote which is on the back of this book, Selected Poems, a quote by John Montague, another great and deceased Irish poet. He says, "The lyric gift of Derek Mahon has already made him a living classic. From an age as bloody and chaotic as the Elizabethan, his poems are among those certain to survive." Okay, well, we're going to finish up with Derek Mahon's surprise posthumous hit. This poem is a 20th century poem. It's written decades ago, but he read it on Irish TV at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was hugely resonant then, and has been all the while we've been going through this. But then when he himself died on October the 1st, the poem's taken on a new meaning since then. And so let's read it. Everything is going to be all right. How should I not be glad to contemplate the clouds clearing beyond the dormer window and a high tide reflected on the ceiling? There will be dying There will be dying, but there is no need to go into that. The poems flow from the hand unbidden, and the hidden source is the watchful heart. The sun rises in spite of everything, and the far cities are beautiful and bright. I lie here in a riot of sunlight, watching the day break and the clouds flying. Everything is going to be all right.